Hi, today we're going to talk about Objective 11.4, describe the structure and function of the ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra, and define micturition. So today we're basically asking ourselves, how is urine transported, stored, and finally eliminated? I wanted to start with this. I'll give you a moment to try to figure it out. Pause the video if you want longer. This is a urologist license plate. If you read it, it says, "No pee, see me." I thought you might enjoy it. And then on to some of the content. So, orient ourselves. Here's the kidneys with the adrenal gland, and the ureters are the tubes that take the urine from the kidney down here to the bladder. And then here's the bladder, and then we can't really see it from this angle, but this would be the urethra down here where the pee actually comes out of. I like this image because this shows us that the ureters actually enter from the posterior side of the bladder. That means they enter the back of the bladder. Why do you think that might be a good thing? Hopefully you're thinking about backflow and kind of like valves, because this positioning of the ureters prevents backflow. So we don't have urine in the bladder traveling back up the ureters. The reason is, if you could picture, once that bladder is full of urine, it's going to expand. And when it expands, it actually blocks this opening, so urine can't go back. Convenient. This is a beautiful piece of artwork I wanted to share with you. Just kidding. This is actually the layers of a ureter, but really, isn't it beautiful? Pretty similar to the layers of the alimentary canal. We have an inner mucosa, and then we have a muscularis layer, and then the outer adventitia or covering. Are you surprised there's a muscular layer? That means that urine doesn't travel by gravity alone. We actually have peristalsis propelling the urine from the kidneys towards the bladder. And my cat thinks it's cute as well. I wanted to mention kidney stones, also known as renal calculi. Calculi means little stone. So sometimes calcium, magnesium, or uric acid, which is normally in urine, but sometimes if there's too much of it, it can actually crystallize and form these little solids up here in the pelvis. Normally they're so small that they can actually travel down the ureters and be eliminated no problem, but sometimes they're bigger and then you actually have to treat them in some way. If you're interested, here's a video about kidney stones and how they're treated. You could also ask Mrs. Creech or Mr. Schreiner about their personal experience with kidney stones. Now let's talk about the bladder. I want to point out that the bladder is kind of similar to the stomach. So you know how the stomach like temporarily stored the food? The bladder temporarily stores the urine, and just like the stomach, it can be small and then it can expand to be larger because it has the same rugae or like the muscular folds. The main muscle in the bladder is called the detrusor. When we did the activity a long time ago where you guys had to pick the most important muscles, I was trying to convince you to pick the detrusor because I like being able to go to the bathroom, but nobody agreed with that choice. The trigon is a little triangular area, and the triangle is formed by the openings. So here's opening number 1 from a ureter, opening number 2 from a ureter, and opening number 3 from the urethra. So these 3 places are all kind of exposed to the outside. This is like a prime area for infection. And also the urine's going to pool down here as well. So not too good. And the image we're looking at right now is of a female bladder and urethra, and I can tell that because the urethra is so short, 3 to 4 centimeters. Think about that the next time you go to the bathroom, how close your urethra actually is to your bladder. Here's a male bladder. We can see it looks pretty similar, except the urethra is significantly longer, 20 centimeters. Also, so urine is going to pass through male urethra, but males also ejaculate through their urethra. That means they can release sperm and semen through their urethra. So dual function here for males in the urinary and the reproductive system. I wanted to show this for a comparison. So let's orient ourselves first. Okay, here's the male reproductive system, here's the urethra, and then back here's the anus. And then over here in females, can you take a second and think of the order of the openings? The very front opening is going to be the bladder. This opening right here is the vagina, and then the back opening is the anus. So urethra, vagina, anus. This is the clitoris right here. Something else to note about this image is that females are much more likely to get a urinary tract infection just because our urethra is so short, it'll be very easy for an infection to be able to travel up here, whereas in males, that's a much longer journey. Additionally, it's really important for females, like when we poop, we really need to wipe front to back. So like you're taking your hand and you're moving that way. If you wipe from back to front, you're taking that poop that's full of bacteria and you're like shoving it up your vagina and your urethra. So if you're not already doing this, please make sure that you're wiping from front to back and staying safe. And I have to mention this, even though you probably remember it, the bladder is made of a special type of epithelium called transitional epithelium, where the cells themselves actually change shape based on how much urine there is. So this would be relaxed and like no urine. And then when the bladder is full, these cells kind of shrink down, and that's how it can hold all of this pee. And this is worth mentioning. So this, we're looking at a view of something cut in half. That's why the intestines look so funny. But again, here's the urethra and the bladder, and here's the vagina. Imagine that you have a fetus in there in your uterus, and look at the bladder. Something good to think about if you're pregnant, how often you will have to pee. I like mentioning this, that again, like the stomach, the urine is highly distendable. That means that it can really expand. So a moderately full bladder, when we go to the bathroom, is like 500 milliliters. We normally feel like we have to go to the bathroom after it gets like 400 milliliters full, but then you know you can wait a little bit. You really don't ever want to get up to 1,000 mils. Technically, it can expand that much, but that's going to feel like you're absolutely going to pee your pants, and there's a chance that your bladder could burst, which would be really dangerous. Similar to the anus, we have sphincters that are going to control when we void or when we actually go to the bathroom. And both males and females have an internal sphincter right here and an external sphincter. The external sphincter is voluntary, so we're not just peeing our pants. In females, remember how the urethra is really close to the vagina? So there's less space for muscles. That means that females tend to have kind of weaker sphincters. So it's basically easier for us to pee our pants. That happens a lot after childbirth. Women will become incontinent. Incontinent means that you can't control when you go to the bathroom. And don't worry, I don't mean like you pee lots all the time, but it's kind of like if you sneeze or if you laugh, a little bit of urine will come out because the sphincter has been weakened from being stretched when the baby's head goes through here. So, yay, another good thing about being pregnant. Micturition. This is like the act of urinating. So we're going to talk about what has to happen to be able to urinate. First, the detrusor must contract. That's the muscle in the bladder. And then the internal urethral sphincter must open, and the external urethral sphincter must open. If all of these things don't happen, you won't be able to go to the bathroom. So we need to appreciate our nervous system for being able to kind of like slowly contract a muscle and make sure the sphincter is open, and then the person chooses to open up their other sphincter. If you're interested in learning more about how this is controlled, I have a couple of videos that explain the nervous system's impact there. And it's worth mentioning that when you were an infant, micturition is reflexive. A reflex means that it happens without kind of conscious input. And then normally when you're around like 2 years old, we start to be able to, like when the brain senses that the bladder starts to distend, we start to be able to think if we want to open that external sphincter or not. As always, you're in my thoughts, and please let me know what questions you have. Thanks.